the music of the band Run River North. AsAmNews recently caught up with the lead spokesman of Run River North, Alex Hwang, who told us how the band was dealing with COVID and how did they get that name.
Sometimes. So go and grab your sweater, the one that you like, and give it some time, sometimes.
Hi, this is Mimi Chen for AsAmNews. We recently caught up with the band Run River North. They're an all-Korean American band from the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. They started about 10 years ago. So we want to know, how has COVID been treating them, and how did they get that name, Run River North?
So the name, we actually changed our name. We're based out in Los Angeles, or we're all San Fernando Valley kids. We were born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. I live with my wife now in Koreatown, and then Daniel and Sally are still in the San Fernando Valley, but they're about to get married this year and figure out where their home is going to be, but most likely somewhere in SoCal for sure. The band name Run River North is we started 10 years ago as Monsters Calling Home, and that was in reference to a song that I wrote called Monsters Calling Home, and that was about my immigrant parents. As the band started off with 6 of us, and all of us just so happened to be all Korean parents, or Korean Americans with parents that all were born and raised in Korea and then immigrated here. And then when we changed our name, we changed it to Run River North because there was another like kind of folk rock band with monsters in their name, and they were getting a lot of buzz, and they're super popular, of Monsters and Men. And so we just kind of wanted to distance ourselves and, you know, kind of do our own thing. And so Run River North kind of came out of just us like letting go of Monsters Calling Home for a second and seeing what stuck. And I felt like by now it feels like it's an image that we feel that our music kind of like invokes pretty well. And oddly and ironically enough, it's like one of the most difficult names for our Korean parents to pronounce. And yeah.
Oh.
So many R's. So many R's. Yeah.
That's a fun observation.
Yeah.
You guys deliberately try to make them say your name?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's always so hard for them. I don't think they just say, hey, that music stuff that you do. So I think it's nice. Yeah.
Was it hard for them to accept that music stuff you do?
I feel like it was different for everybody in the band, and for the 3 of us, it definitely runs the gamut. Like, you know, not having other Korean, or, you know, Asian Americans kind of to look forward to, look to see how it's done, definitely scares. I think it would scare any parent, whether they were Asian or not. Like, you know, if there was no one doing what you're doing in your field that looked like you, and you only saw certain types of people going for that, I think, you know, for that reason, I think, you know, any parent would be scared. And I think knowing that, like, with my parents, it wasn't like something out of, you know, like completely left field. I was in the entertainment industry. I was working at a talent agency as an assistant, and, you know, being responsible with my finances. And then when I kind of brought the idea to my parents, it wasn't really like, oh, I'm going to do this thing and you're not going to stop me. It was more like, hey, I have a plan. I'd like to try this out for a year, and without like working a second job. And then if it's still not, you know, working out, I'll take up another job. But this is something I'm definitely going to try out for a bit. And I had done well. I had accrued very little school debt. I was, you know, all the logistical things were in place, and it wasn't really like I had to persuade them about what I was doing, but it was more like, I think it was why I was doing it, and that was easy it wasn't really hard to, you know, persuade them. They understood why I would want to do something like this, and so it could have been anything, honestly, and it just so happened to be music. So
It's interesting because so many Asian people, of course, talk about mom and dad want me to become a doctor, lawyer. So you actually had parental support.
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of, I think because I had a healthy relationship with my parents in terms of communicating that, rather than like, because I feel like a lot of people harp on like doctors and lawyers, and I think we need Asian doctors and lawyers. I really don't see why people are so angry at like, being a doctor and lawyer, but I just think I think it's because you've heard it so many times, you know, like a lot of these Asian kids, or Asian people my age, like bristle at like, oh, like, those are the only options. I do think like, people get into those fields with very inspirational and very like, authentic whys. And I think a lot of times people just want to say no to things just because it's their parents that said it, and it seems like collectively that stereotype of the Asian parent wanting what's best for their kid, articulated into like, oh, become a doctor, lawyer, or whatever, some stable job. I don't know. I sometimes have issues about that, because I think like, I don't think it's like the like what I think the options were kind of limited, and I think that sucks. That like you could only think of like a couple handful of things to be, and that was it, and not realizing there are plenty of other things that you could grow up to be, regardless of whether you're Asian or not. And yeah, I feel like people make so much of a deal about their Asian parents, when really it's like, it's just an excuse for maybe not really looking deeply into like what you want to do with your life, and then making it like easy to blame your parents for giving you such a forceful option that you couldn't choose otherwise, and you were so unhappy. So
In some ways, actually, Asian parents are the same as any other parent when you think about it, because
yeah,
all parents want their kids to be successful, and
right.
a career in music is not exactly clear cut.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's it's been interesting having, like I feel like it's so interesting that I've looked up so many interviews of like white bands, and they're never asked, what do your white parents think of you following music? It's never like a priority question. And yet, we have it so much. We have this stigma against Asian parents being something so much different, when it's like, I feel like all parents have that concern. It's just kind of been,
Mhm.
again, it's been articulated into such a easy stereotype that it's been repeated so many times, like
I,
doctor, lawyer, engineer, doctor, lawyer, engineer, when it's like,
well, I
you know,
blame the Tiger Mom lady for that, because my parents were fine.
yeah. I feel like there's benefits in being a tiger sometimes, but again, like, I think it's just like, yeah, you got to learn to see the kid and to see each other as who they are, rather than like try to implement a system that's going to work for all kids across the board. And so, yeah,
So how's COVID been treating you and your band?
um, pretty shitty, but I think, I mean, not any more shittier than anyone else. I feel like we were lucky that we had a tour that wrapped right at before the lockdown started happening. So in January, when we went on a full country tour and hit like 20 plus cities across the country, and so we were just coming off of that, and we were just ending our relationship with our label of like 8 years, or 8 or 9 years, and it was like, okay, like let's make 2020 about like doing things independently. And then COVID hit, and then luckily for us, had already decided like we just want to release music, and if we were to tour, that'd be great, but in the meantime, let's try to like keep to a schedule to release something as consistently as possible, as a new independent band. And so it gave us the opportunity to kind of like really hone in on that. And the part that wasn't shitty was that we discovered this great thing called Patreon that other bands and other creatives were using, and it was a way to like directly connect with fans, and then find ways to not necessarily, oh yeah, kind of to monetize off of that, so that there wasn't middlemen, or there wasn't like Spotify or something taking a percentage. Well, actually, I guess Patreon takes a percentage, but like you're going after your super fans. And in that process, what I found was that more than the monetary funds, that the support that we were getting from our fans and our patrons, like we had found a way to develop a community around Patreon uses Discord as one of their apps, and it's like a kind of a chat room based thing. And that chat room has now been this thing where even today, like people, our fans are going in on there, and they're not talking about Run River North. They're just like, hey, how was your day? Like, oh man, it's been really rough recently. And like, I'm and sharing other things like, baking recipes, or what's going on in Pokemon Go, or what's happening on WandaVision, or, oh, I didn't know, this band or this, movie is coming out. And so all of a sudden, like, we were able to create a community online through Run River North that wasn't just about Run River North. And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for, COVID and lockdown. So that we have seen definitely some silver lining.
Mm.
But in other news, like we no longer can tour, and our band being such a, where our level is, like, if there's no touring, then there is literally no income coming in for our band. And so I feel like we've all had to pivot in terms of like, what are we going to do if this isn't going to, go back to normal for a couple of years at least, And so if we're not going to be touring for a bit, like, we have to find jobs.
While COVID has ended their touring plans, the band Run River North still performs virtually. As a matter of fact, tonight at 8 o'clock, you can catch them on the Tractivist stage for the Joy Ruckus Club Lunar New Year Festival. For ASAM News, I'm Mimi Chen.